Yeah, but if everybody's ready, we've got a nice interview with Judd Winick. He's going to talk about his origin of high-low, how he got into it, how, a lot of people, parents know that Judd Winick is known as creator of a bunch of cool Batman comics, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and he sort of explains why he created High-Low, which is a really great graphic novel series that everybody should check out. So here we go. I'm going to get started up and enjoy, everybody. Hi, everybody. John Gallagher here at the Kids Love Comics page. I hope you're all having a good weekend and glad that you're here with us. I have with me a very special guest, Mr. Judd Winick, who is very well known for not only working on what we call mainstream comics for DC Comics Under the Red Hood, but part of the reason he's here with us today is for his very special graphic novel series, High-Low, which I'm a big fan of. Members of my family are as well. And welcome, Judd.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a big thrill. Thanks.
That's great. Well, and how many High-Low books are out right now?
We have 6 High-Low books came out. Number 7 is coming out February 2nd. I'll show the kids the cover in a little bit. I'm very, very lucky. It's been a book a year for the last 6 years, and people seem to dig it, so it's awesome. I tell the same joke over and over again. As you know, as a fellow cartoonist, we live like 10-year-olds. We make things up and then we draw them while we half watch television, which is pretty much what I did when I was 10. So it's a great job to have.
Exactly. And reading your books, I feel as though you and I might have watched a lot of the same cartoons, TV shows, and movies.
Oh, for sure. I'm gonna, let's see, Bloom County, lots of Calvin and Hobbes. When we were older, we were already like teenagers plus by the time Calvin and Hobbes came out. A lot of Looney Tunes, I assume.
Yes.
Big
Chuck Jones fan.
Huge Chuck Jones fan. If you ever, kids, let me put it this way. If you ever meet a cartoonist and they don't like Chuck Jones, you actually haven't met a cartoonist. You've met somebody who's, I don't know what they're doing in the trade. Like, yeah, Chuck's okay. I'm more of like, no, Chuck Jones. And if you don't know what we're talking about, just go to YouTube and look up Chuck Jones, Bugs Bunny, Chuck Jones, Daffy Duck. Like, actually, you all talk amongst yourselves. I'm gonna talk to John about this for a second. So for me, the best is Chuck Jones doing Daffy Duck. And what I love about it is it's not Daffy Duck at his daffiest. He's just so angry. He's so, his Daffy Duck is so brutally, wonderfully ticked off. That's carried through most of my work. Ticked off characters. I love it.
Oh yeah. And Duck Amuck was one of the great cartoon shorts where he's being affected by an unknown artist off screen who's erasing him and drawing him.
And that's brilliant too. Yes. Yeah, well, yes, we get to play the Almighty a little bit now.
Right.
Cartoonist as God, yes.
Exactly. And with that, I'm going to hand over the screen and the presentation to you, and can't wait to see what you're going to share with us.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Okay. So for everyone playing at home, excuse me while I do this. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to decide on, I'm going to try the desktop. Let's try the desktop. Let's do that. And I think with the desktop, this way you can actually see me while I talk. So I should be up there in there. Okay. So what I'm going to do, kids and grown-ups playing at home, I'm going to give this little talk. I'm going to tell a little story. And then when we're done, John and I are going to chit chat and answer some questions. So hold all those. if we were at a cafeteria or a cafetorium or an auditorium at a school right now, I'd be saying like, so just hold all those questions to the end. If you raise your hand, I'm not going to call on you because I'm still telling my story. So anyway, let us begin. So this is me. I'm Judd Winnick. I'm a cartoonist. It's just about the best job in the whole wide world. And I do the Hilo series. As we talked about, we got 6 Hilo books out right now. And next year we got number 7. This is the 7th Hilo book. This is, you can see it's Hilo, Gina, the girl who broke the word. And the book comes out February 2nd, 2021. And now I've made everyone publicity happy that I mentioned it. But as I said, I wanted to tell you guys a story. And this is the story of how I came up with Hilo and stuff. So the story about how I came up with Hilo and stuff. So our story begins with me as a kid, which was a long, long, long time ago when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, that long ago. And when I was a kid, I was a very big fan of hitting buttons. So like I'm trying to get my keynote to move forward. Bear with me. Okay, there we go. It's too much. Let's go back. There it is. I was a very big fan of Star Wars. I was a very big fan of Looney Tunes that we were just talking about, and Chuck Jones. I was a huge fan of monster movies. And when I say monster movies, do mean monster movies, not scary movies. I mean guys in costumes jumping around on models of cities, that kind of monster movie. I was a huge fan of that. And in particular, my favorite movie was King Kong. I loved King Kong. And I also love drawing pictures, probably more so than anything else. That's who I was. So as a kid, I think I was happiest if I was drawing pictures while half watching a monster movie on television. That was me as a kid. Now, the thing I loved probably to draw more than anything else was, as I said, King Kong. It was probably my favorite piece of creative work to work on. And I would draw King Kong. And I would draw King Kong over and over again. But before I get into that, do you all know the story of King Kong? Do you know? Some of you probably do, some of you don't. You're probably not getting a proper education. So, okay, 30 seconds. Here's the short version of the story of King Kong. King Kong was a 100-foot tall gorilla who lived on Skull Island, which was this prehistoric island. One day, a bunch of explorers came to Skull Island. They found King Kong. They captured him. They brought him back to New York City, where he escaped, ran amok, climbed the Empire State Building, and got shot down by airplanes. That's the short version of King Kong. You should probably go find the long version. Anyway, I tell you that, tell you this. So I used to draw King Kong over and over again. But specifically, I used to do the same drawing of King Kong over and over again. I used to draw the Empire State Building. And when I say the Empire State Building, I mean the whole building, including every single window in the building. And when I was finally done drawing the building, I would draw King Kong at top and the airplanes trying to shoot him down. Now, the thing is, I didn't really want to draw the Empire State Building with all the windows in there. I was really not interested in that. The part I really wanted to draw was just this scene at top. I really just wanted to draw King Kong and the airplanes at top. This is what I really wanted to draw as a kid. But for some reason, I felt like I had to draw the entire building before I would draw King Kong at top. I don't know why, but I did. And honestly, I did this for years. Now, jump ahead a few years later. So Small Judd grows up and he's a little less Small Judd. And I found a few other interests. In particular, I fall in love with comic strips, the funnies. Y'all know what comic strips are? Most of you do. More importantly, we have to go back in history again. When I was a kid, long ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, I loved comic strips. And we had these things called newspapers. Newspapers are a lot like iPads that have current events on them. They're and they're made out of paper. So envision an iPad made out of paper, that's a newspaper. But more importantly, in these newspapers, in the middle, usually 2 to 3 pages of it, you had the funnies, comic strips. And every day we would get a newspaper delivered to the house, and every day there'd be 2 to 3 pages of comic strips and the funnies. And on Sunday, they showed up in color, and I loved them. I loved comic strips. And it was around this time that, well, I was looking at comic strips and I noticed that's kind of how I draw. That's kind of who I am, And I started drawing my own cartoons. Well, in particular, It is how I used to draw. For example, this is a cat, right? Obviously, that's a cat. Okay. This is Garfield, right? Also a cat. They don't really look alike. But as a kid, I realized that I couldn't draw the realistic looking cat, but I could draw Garfield. And I discovered through comic strips, that's how I draw. That's how I do things. That's how I create. I do goofy drawings. So it was around this time that I started doing lots and lots of goofy drawings. In particular, I would try to do as many funny cartoons as I could. And I'd show them to my parents. My mom and dad were my first audience. If I could make my mom and dad laugh, that was just everything. So it was around this time that I also decided, like, you know what I want to do? I want to make a comic strip. I wanted to make a comic strip that's in a daily newspaper that comes out every single day. That's what I want to do with my life. I was all of like 11 years old, and I was already set on my goal, what I wanted to do. Now, I also had a huge love of comic books, meaning superhero comics. I just dug them. And I'm talking about comics like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and Batman. I was a huge fan of superhero comics. And I just loved everything about them. I really loved the action. I really loved that there was always good guys and bad guys, the superheroes and the supervillains. And I loved how dramatic they were. Whereas comic strips were always about being funny, comic books were about, telling a story that can get really, really serious, even a little bit scary, a little bit tense. I think the key word that I just said, like, is dramatic. They could really tell a story in a way that felt meaningful. And you could do anything. When I was a kid, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we didn't have movies like we had now where you could do pretty much anything with CGI, with computer graphics. When I was a kid, if you wanted to see something fantastic like this, you had to open up a comic book. It was the only way you're going to see this kind of story. And I just loved them. But I could not draw like this. No way. Still can't. I'm a goofy drawer. I'm a doodler. Now, jump ahead many years later. I have been very, very lucky. As small Judd became big Judd with a little less hair up top, because that happens, I have had the opportunity to tell stories in a variety of ways. I am a professional cartoonist, and it's been 20 years of doing cartooning and writing. I've done it all kinds of different ways. I did a comic strip, finally, that ran in newspapers for about 4 years. It was called Frumpy the Clown. I did an animated series for Cartoon Network. It was called Life and Times of Juniper Lee, and it was a blast. I wrote superhero comics for a long time. I did this X-Men comic called Exiles. I wrote Green Arrow for a while. I wrote Green Lantern for a while. And I even wrote this comic book that you might have heard of called Batman. John and I were talking about that at the top of the show here. Now, I tell you all that to tell you this. About, oh goodness, 8 years ago, my son, this is a picture of my son. My son came to me and he said, "Dad," and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Dad, can I read some of the superhero comics you wrote? Like, could I please maybe read, I don't know, your Batman comics that you wrote?" And I just say, "Oh, my Batman comics." No, you may not read my Batman comics, because my Batman comics, well, they're kind of intense. They're really not made for like a 7-year-old, buddy. We should find a graphic novel or a comic book that's good for you. So he and I looked around, and the one that we found for him that we really felt fit was a series called Bone. Do you all know Bone? If you guys don't know the series Bone, you should check it out. Bone is phenomenal. So I got my son all 9 graphic novels of Bone, and he plowed right through them, and he loved them. Now, full disclosure, I happen to know Jeff Smith, the cartoonist who does Bone. Jeff's a good buddy of mine. So I called him up and said, "Jeff, my son just went crazy, go nuts, bananas for Bone." And Jeff said, "That is awesome. Tell you what, I'm going to send you guys something in the mail. Keep an eye on your mailbox." And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, we got a big, gigantic box from Jeff. And in the box was Bone merchandise. We had Bone stuffed animals, Bone action figures, Bone hats, Bone t-shirts, Bone posters. And my son, he became a Bone super fan. He loved it. Everything in his life became about Bone. The Bone t-shirt was on constantly. He took the Bone action figures. The Bone action figures are fighting with the Star Wars action figures. Everything was about Bone. And me, I got kind of jealous because, well, I'm a cartoonist, and I figured I should be able to tell a story that he likes as much as Bone. So I sat down at my drawing board, literally, sat down at the drawing board and tried to figure out what that story would be. Now, like I said, I've done all kinds of different storytelling. And I did comic strips, and that's kind of how I draw. I draw kind of goofy, like a comic strip, and I like my stories to have lots of jokes in them, like a comic strip. But I've also written superhero comics, which I knew my son was interested in seeing a superhero-like story that was an action adventure. So I took these two ideas, something that looks and feels like a comic strip, but kind of reads like a superhero comic, and I put those two ideas in a blender, not an actual blender, but my head, and out came Hilo. And Hilo is very much a combination of both those things. It very much is an action adventure that's got lots of action in it, but it's also extremely goofy. It is drawn like a goofy comic strip and has lots and lots of jokes, but it also has lots of fun action. Some of the action is fun, some of the action is serious, like all the kinds of supervillains I used to enjoy in the superhero comics I read growing up. And the story, well, the story is about Hilo and his two best friends, Gina and DJ. And for those who don't know the series, I'm just going to tell you about it real quick. So our story starts with DJ, actually. DJ is this terrific kid who's in a family of 5, and he's the middle kid. He's got 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. And both his older brothers and his younger sisters are all great at something. His oldest brother is a tennis star. His other older brother is a chemistry whiz and incredibly smart. His younger sister, she is amazing at many, many things. She's great at ballet. She can sing. She can play piano. She can play violin, and she's amazing at all that. And his youngest sister, Lisa, she's the smartest of the bunch. She's 7 years old and has already skipped 2 grades. But DJ, well, DJ is kind of in the middle. He's not good at anything. He's not bad at anything. He's just okay, or at least that's what he thinks. And that bugs him because he's not great at anything, except he used to be great at being best friends with Gina. This is Gina. Gina was his next door neighbor, and he was best friends with her. It was the one thing he was absolutely awesome at. It was the one thing that he absolutely knew he was really, really good at. I am excellent at being best friends with Gina. And then Gina moved away. And since then, DJ really hasn't been good at much of anything. So we catch up with him at the beginning of the book. He's 10 years old, hasn't been good at much of anything for a long time. And he is sitting on the top of his clubhouse feeling pretty sorry for himself when, out of the clear blue sky, he sees something crazy. It's a ball of fire. A ball of fire comes tumbling out of the sky and crashes in his backyard. So DJ hops off his clubhouse, runs on down, looks in the crater, and who should he find? You know who he finds. He finds Hilo, unconscious and wearing a pair of silver underpants. And that's where our story starts. Hilo shows up on Earth, and he doesn't know who he is, how he got here, that he's got superpowers or anything. That is where our story begins. And that is kind of like how Hilo sort of kicks off. Now, I told you all that to tell you this. I know I keep saying that, but it's the truth. And I have told you all that to tell you this part. In doing Hilo, I have found it's a lot like the King Kong drawing that I was telling you about. Now, the King Kong drawing, that I would draw the entire Empire State Building, and then I would draw King Kong atop. But the thing was, I didn't really want to draw the entire building. I just wanted to draw King Kong atop. I have found that Hilo, in a lot of ways, well, he's a lot like my King Kong. And what I mean by that is that I've done all kinds of storytelling. I've done comic strips, I've done animation, I've done superhero comics, and I sort of feel like all those things were kind of like drawing the Empire State Building. All these things kind of led up to doing Hilo. All those things came together for me to find the story I wanted to tell. But I'm really lucky because I don't have to draw the Empire State Building anymore. I can just draw the top of the Empire State Building anymore. Hilo's my King Kong. Hilo's the character at the top of the building. And I joked in the beginning that I get the best job in the whole wide world. And I was even joking with John about it, that we both get to do this. When I was 10 years old, I used to make things up and draw them and half watch television. Well, now I'm 50 years old and I make things up and I draw them while I half watch television. And I'm incredibly lucky that even though it's taken me a long time, I'm 50, and it took me a long time to find my King Kong at the top of the building, which wound up being Hilo. And I have to tell you, honestly and truly, Hilo is easily the work I'm most proud of, and the thing that I think I've been working towards my whole life. So I'm very, very lucky in that way. This is the story I get to tell, Hilo. And the story will continue. Every year there'll be a new Hilo book. Every year will be a new story. So that is a story about how I came up with Hilo and stuff. So
Oh, that's
thank you for that.
great.
Thank you. So I was sharing the screen. Do I unshare it now? What do I do?
Yeah,
Pause share.
I think you
There.
unshare.
Okay, I just did that. Are we doing that now? Are we good?
I'm sharing. It looks like I'm viewing your screen.
It's a couple old dudes making this work. Stop share. There.
This will
Boom.
stop. Oh, good. There we go.
That's what I did. Okay, cool. Done.
There we go. Okay. And then, so thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the way you really brought that together to show that it's a progression. It's not just that the idea just comes to you. It's a development from all the other influences that you've had. And then also influences from your family. And
yeah,
is that, so going all the way back to when you were a kid and you liked comic strips and you liked comics, what was the first moment? Do you remember a moment when you were reading either a comic strip or a comic where you kind of, I call it like the shiver moment. It's like, that, like, whoa, something's going on here.
Well, I would say, yeah, a couple of them. A couple that I can really point to. One, I don't know specifically when it happened, but it was definitely the first time I read Garfield. And I don't think it was in my paper from the jump. Boring History. I think Garfield started in like 78, 79, around there. And I think I first saw it a couple of years later after it was already getting press. My parents got me, I think I just read about it or whatnot, and they got me the second Garfield collection. I think it's Garfield at Large or something. I have it behind me. I think I have the actual one behind me somewhere. I'm not gonna find it for you, but I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and I would read it and just giggle and giggle and giggle. And it was really a lightning rod moment where it's like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Because I'd always been drawing and always doing cartoons. But I think it was the first time like, no, I want to do exactly this. I want to like tell jokes while doing cartoons. And I started by doing a comic strip. That's what I want to do. And then years later, I graduated up to the comic strip Bloom County. And this one happened specifically in this way. I did not get Bloom County in my newspaper right away. My grandmother had sent me, she was living in Florida at the time, and sent me like the local version of whatever Parade magazine was. It was like a little magazine that came in the Sunday newspaper. And they did an article about this new cartoonist, Burke Breathitt. And I just saw like 3 or 4 of the cartoons that ran with the article. And they just knocked me right on my butt. I do remember that, and that I had to get it. And I think the first collection, which is called Loose Tales, came out after that. So in both cases, comic strips, Garfield and up to Bloom County. It, for me, was really, oh, I want to do that. And, you know, it began with me ripping off Garfield when I was like 11 years old. And then when I was about 13, 14, I started ripping off Bloom County. And let that be a lesson to you kids. You know, the best artists steal. We just steal, we just rob wholesale. And I did. I copied Garfield a lot. I came up with my own comic strip called Marvin, which was about just a fat, grouchy cat, exactly like Garfield. And later I started doing comic strips, which looked exactly like Bloom County. Even my first, like, when I did a college comic strip, I think the first year and a half, it just looked exactly like Bloom County, until I finally started to find my own voice. So there, you asked a simple question. I prattled on for 10 minutes.
No, that's great. I think a lot of people, especially in college, I think there is always that leaning towards something that influenced you. And Bloom County, yeah, I'm a couple years older than you. Bloom County was a big influence, whereas I know Breathitt was influenced by Doonesbury.
Yeah, very much so.
He has said as much, and I think that's really cool, because I do know that there are certain moments that will sort of inspire you. And then just going into your work with DC and Marvel Comics, was there a specific superhero comic or comic in general that you enjoyed the most when you were a kid or a teenager?
Yeah, I had always read, I had read superhero comics from just pretty much birth. And that was purely because of my dad. My dad, and he's not a fanboy or anything still. It's just, my dad is a 75. And when you were a kid in the 50s, everybody read comics. For those playing at home, they used to sell like 1 million copies of Superman a month, like an actual number, like 1 million. And then actually for a little while, Captain Marvel outsold it. My dad was a Captain Marvel fan. So anyway, my father used to buy me, he used to go to like 7-Eleven and grab a bunch off the spinner rack and bring them home for me. And I think it wasn't, some of them would eventually just click with me and some didn't. Uh, Two which are really memorable, um, uh, that my dad just got me and gave to me. One was, there was this, I think it was the 500th issue of Action Comics. It was like triple sized. It was a monster, and it took you through the entire history of Superman. Superman was like walking through the Superman museum, and he's telling his life story. And something about having the entire life story about Superman really just struck me. Is something, because it actually, I've read it since then, and it actually was like really kind of sad and personal, which I guess I was about 10 or 11 when I read it. And before that, superhero comics were about fights and silliness and all that stuff. This actually felt like a real story. Um, and then later, I sort of graduated to reading more Marvel comics, and I got into the X-Men, which is John Byrne and Chris Claremont's X-Men run, which was like kind of, that was sort of the seminal piece for me that really made me like a comic book fan in a big way. So I'd say those two.
Yeah, and X-Men had such a soap opera sort of feel
Oh yeah.
to it. And
Oh
I'm
yeah. No, and this undercurrent, and only realizing later, this sort of undercurrent of human rights, that you didn't even realize that, it's the beautiful thing about superhero comics. Still, I'd like to think still that there's right and wrong. There's good guys and there's bad guys. There's heroes and there's villains. And when we were kids and reading them, uh, I think that was really important. You kind of knew where you stood, uh, and it always touched upon issues of prejudice, and as well as, and like sort of unspoken issues about race, and and who people are and humanity, um, and it was all just told through the lens of superhero comics, and I think it was really formative for me as well. You
And do
know,
you feel that some of that carries through with Hilo? I know, one sort of thing that's thrown at kids' graphic novels and comics sometimes is there's an assumption that it is, Barney the dinosaur. It's
yeah,
that
right.
it's dumbed down, and I certainly don't feel that way about Hilo. And I was just wondering how you deal with some of deeper issues along with the fun and the humor.
Well, I'd say some of it happens kind of accidentally, because it's just the story I want to tell. That um, I, the way I approach it, I try not to I try not to tell a story that's just squarely aimed at kids. I try to think about it as all ages. I try to think about it as, if moms and dads are sitting down and reading this with their kids, I don't want them to say like, "Oh dear God, I got to read this again." I try to aim for the Pixar movies. Um, Pixar, if you ask anyone who works at Pixar, they are perennially driven crazy, and people say they make kids movies. They're deep believers that like, no, we make movies. It just happens to be all ages. So I try to make it for everybody. And with that, um, I mean, I love a silly joke as much as anyone. And I should point out that nobody likes the burps and fart jokes more in my books than my father. Okay. He has a proper low grade humor, and he digs it. Um, so I love that. But also, I think it's important that you tell a story with a bit of tension, that you tell us a story that feels like it might count, that maybe they get a little bit sad, a little bit dramatic, a little bit scary. Um, I like, as I was saying, that when I was 10 and read that Superman comic, I wasn't struck just because there was a big fight with Lex Luthor at the end, which there was. uh, but I think I was struck more by these 3 pages where Superman was talking about how much he loved Krypto, his dog. Him talking about how much he loved his dog and how special he was. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. Okay. It's only been 40 years. So when I do Hilo, I try to think about, yeah, is there a way of telling these stories that kids and grown-ups can sort of understand, that also still manages to have a bit of heart, a bit of drama? I think it's important. I think they mean a little bit more when you do that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think people don't realize sometimes with Charlie Brown and Peanuts how much heart and seriousness sort of was lying under some of these very silly stories.
Yeah.
I think as adults, it hurts too much sometimes to hold on to it. But, as a cartoonist, you kind of have to bring that out in your stories. So we're going to go into some quick questions from kids because these are the things they're really interested in. How long does it take you to make one Hilo book?
It takes about a year. They come out every year, and it takes about a year. I'd say the part that takes me the longest is writing it, as well it should. That's the part you should work on the hardest, and it's the least fun. John, you can just probably attest this to this as well. Oh, and hey, kids, any other authors are talking to you and they say they love writing, they just love looking at the blank page and just bringing something to it. They're just lying to you. They're just making it up. They do not love writing. They love reading their stuff. They love editing a first draft. That's what they love. But yeah, it takes.
I was just going to say, banging your head against the wall. It feels so good when you're done.
Oh man, yes. Yeah, the relief of no longer banging your head against the wall. That's what we're talking about. And also, that beauty of the first draft going off. You've written it, then you've drawn out your rough draft, and in our case, we get to send it along to our editor, Shayna Corey. Well, John and I have the same editor, Shayna Corey. Shayna's always really, really just amazing. She's really helpful. She's a storyteller herself, so she understands how it works. So I don't know if I can actually get through it as fast as I do, like a book a year, if I didn't have Shayna guiding me through there. But that's what takes the longest. The writing stinks. I don't like doing it, but it's got to get done. And then the fun part starts was when I'm drawing it. Then the really, really fun part is when I'm inking it, when I'm drawing over my pencils and ink, because that's just fun. Then I'm listening to podcasts and half watching television and rewatching the entire run of The West Wing one more time while I'm down there drawing. It's the best.
Yes, that's a personal favorite for me as well. And and then when I finish the series, like I don't want to start over again, but it is good sometimes to have a show that really well, so you can occupy that part of your brain. Because if a show's too interesting, I was just talking to my assistant Sydney about Mask of the Phantasm, the Batman animated movie. And I tried to listen to it like a radio show while I was drawing, and I couldn't do it. It was too interesting.
No, you gotta get stuff that's one really, really chatty. You guys talk amongst yourselves. John and I are gonna talk about this. Things we do while we're drawing. So one, you gotta find a show that's really, really chatty. So West Wing's a good one. Like A Better Call Saul, pretty good. Mm-hmm. They have really strong visuals, so it's hard. But shows where they're like really making with the chit chat, that's good. But also, if you've seen it before and really, really love it, yes, it sort of just carries you through. So you're not constantly stopping on, what was that? You don't want that. You want to just keep plowing on through, like a radio show.
Now, you talked about how you would draw while you were watching King Kong or watching, did you watch TV while you worked on your homework? Because I did. I've been told by people I could never do that. And for some reason, I had the TV on. I think that's why I've got all these pop culture references bouncing around my head. I always had the television on. So I'm doing math, and I don't know, it's happy days.
Probably for math. I was probably pretty bad at math, and I was really bad at math. So like that, in my household, the TV was going, it never stopped. We were one of those households. And I think most of my education happened while a rerun of MASH was going on.
Right. Well, there was a period in like the 80s where 24 hours a day, there had to be a rerun of MASH on television. It was like the law.
Yeah, and I was there for most of it. I can even tell you from 4 o'clock to 5 every day on Channel 5 back in New York, there was MASH, and I would watch 2 episodes a day for like forever. It was a huge influence on me. So yeah, I did a lot of that. A lot of homework being done while the TV was on, which you should not do. You shouldn't do. I should say now, you probably as well. Like we should probably point this out. We are not talking about writing while the TV is going or listening to podcasts or anything. We're talking about drawing, which is a different thing. Your brain can be occupied while that is a multitasking thing. When I'm writing, nothing else can be going on. I just, probably why I hate it so much. Like I want to half watch The West Wing, but no, I got to figure out how to make this scene funny. So the writing has to take place pretty much in silence.
Right. You don't want Hilo starting to sound like Jed Bartlett as your.
Nope.
Uh,
There could be worse things, but yeah, no.
that's true. Well, so another kid's question: what is the hardest part? And I think you kind of answered it in the writing of.
Yeah.
But what's the hardest part? What's the hardest character to draw in the Hilo series?
Oh, well, somebody new, I'll have to say. I'll say, I mean, if you want to get down to it, Gina's hair. So we got DJ, we've got Gina, we've got Hilo. Gina's hair, I did a lot of these. She's got braids and she's got lines through them. That was probably a mistake early on because I'm still having to draw these lines in her hair. You know, you got to think ahead. So that gets a little time consuming. It's not hard, it's time consuming. But anytime I do a new character, it takes a little while. Like right now in the 8th book, I've got this small little character who over the course of drawing her for 200 pages, she kind of changes by the end of the book. And now I'm looking at the beginning again. It's like, oh, let me just match it up. So anyone new is kind of hard. But everybody else, like Hilo, DJ, Gina, I'm on my 6th book. So we're a good 1,200 pages of characters in. So I pretty much have them down. They're not hard, but it is something to think about. If you're planning on, planning on doing a story with a character over and over again, take the time to sit down and draw that character over and over again, or you're going to be stuck with it. I always go to a comic book reference, comic book artist Walt Simonson, who's one of the best who ever lived. So Walt Simonson talks about, he created this character called Beta Ray Bill, who becomes Beta Ray Thor. To tell it really short for everyone playing at home, he was an alien who managed to pick up Thor's hammer and become Thor. And Walt Simonson talks about that when he became Thor, Beta Ray Thor had this amazing, beautiful costume. You should look it up. It's very elaborate, beautiful cape, these giant boots, all these things going on, and so the chest plate, whatnot, these things going on the shoulder blades, this beautiful helmet. It's gorgeous, an unbelievable design. And the way Walt tells it, I think, is that by the time he was drawing him in the 2nd issue, he realized, oh my gosh, I got to draw this guy over and over and over again. There's so much going on in this costume. So sometimes you got to plan ahead. Sometimes simple works. And John, I'm sure you could attest to this as well. That, you know, you got to find, you don't want them to be boring, but you want to have them just enough detail, but not too much detail that you can't keep doing it over and over again without being so labor intensive.
Oh yeah, actually, I have a little pup. This is Mindy, who's in Max Meow, my comic.
Yeah.
And Mindy has purple eyeglasses, and those purple eyeglasses have caused no end of. I mean, I couldn't have just gotten her laser surgery first before I drew her?
The glasses over. What are we talking about? Are we talking about like a 3/4 turn becomes a pain? Or are we talking about like what does it for the glasses?
Well,
why is it irritating?
It ended up being the way they're rendered. It's almost easier just to have a bunch of pairs of glasses in Photoshop that is dropped in the colors. And of course that makes it, infuriating at times, or oh, the glasses don't look right, or I have to alter them. And so really it was a case where I made it so I couldn't just draw it on a page. And it's, live and learn. So it's one of those things because I thought it was neat to have glasses over top of the mask.
Yes.
But I'll learn. But and then one, I haven't even held up the book. I mean, one thing that a lot of people don't realize, yes, right behind you, is cover design. And the covers for Hilo seem to have, I had another one right. Oh, was that? Yep, another one. Here's another one. There seems to be a difference between what are perceived as mainstream comics or comic shop comics in the cover designs. And what would you speak up to that for a little bit?
Well, I think this was an important note from Shayna early on that I think the first cover ideas I had were more like the comic books we grew up with. They're kind of busy, got a lot of business going on. You want them to grab and whatnot. And the first one I get no, let's try to get iconic and simple. And then I actually started thinking about oh, what are the comic book covers that I remember as a kid? What are the ones that jumped out at me as a kid? And they were more of these like simple, clean, iconic ones without a lot of business. So that's what I always try to do. I mean, I'm sorry, it sounds like a little bit of business, but a little bit of shelf appeal, meaning that if a kiddo or a grown up sees it from across the room, I want them to be able to sort of have a semblance of what's going on there. And also with each cover, you try to tell the story with just a little bit of going on, like, what is this book about? You know, if I had to like break it down to just a feeling. So it was about keeping it simple. And that took a lot of work. 7 books in. I mean, I feel like the 7th book's a cheat because it's because we're starting a whole new story arc. So I just swapped everyone out. It looks just like the first one. But I think that's what I try to do. Try to keep it simple and try to have a story that's evocative of it, of the story they were telling on the inside. I mean, case in point, we don't come up with the titles. I don't come up with the titles until the book's done. Like I finished writing the book and only then, like, okay, so what's this one about? What am I trying to say here? With this last one with Gina, the girl who broke the world, that's what kind of like clicked in my brain. It's like, well, what happens? Oh, well, all told, the world kind of got broken over the course of this story. Like, oh, there we go. Let's do that. Girl who broke the world.
Well, you talked about Shayna and like working with editors for kids who may not realize, like an editor is like equal parts cheerleader and teacher, almost checking your dialogue and making sure that it's making sense, which isn't always our priority as cartoonists. And one thing with Shayna is there have been times where I felt annoyed. And usually that means Shayna is doing her job really well. And one of the things in my second book was Max, there's someone who wants to steal all the peanuts in Kiddiopolis. I threw that out there and Shayna had a really good point. She's like, there's a lot of people who are allergic to peanuts. Can we make it something else? And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like I didn't say that to Shayna, but I felt it. I'm like, no, it's got to be peanuts, as though it really mattered. I mean, and then I'm like, what? Should I make them donuts? And I was like, suddenly I pictured all the donuts getting stolen from Kiddiopolis. There's a donut farm, and then the book became Donuts in Danger, Max Meow, Donuts in Danger. And so it's one of those things where having an editor can be so great. And
then, yeah, I mean, with Shayna in particular, I've worked with a lot of people, and Shayna has this unique ability of, like, in this case, I mean, with you, was it really important that it was peanuts? Like, no. And like, it seems like a huge change. Like, look, it's all going to be about peanuts. It's like, does it have to actually be peanuts? Because if we're bumping some of the kids off the road a little bit because of peanuts, when it could be something else that, like, who's allergic to donuts? Like, nobody. Even if you have lactose issues, you're having gluten-free-ish donuts. You're fine. Everybody can have donuts.
Yeah.
It's actually a minor change that changes the whole thing. It doesn't really affect your story. So they are very much
made it
your first reader, your best critic, your best friend, and also like, you could change this. It's not going to change anything in the story. But yes, it's always that first moment of like, "Well, are you crazy? It's got to be peanuts." Again.
Yeah. And I don't know if you get edits from Sheena like this, but I get every now and then she'll put in like, it's just, I'm like, oh, there's a comment, and it's just lol, and I'm like, that made me feel so good. That took her so little time to make me feel so good. And usually
she does said lots. Yeah, editors don't do that. Yes, I get lots of like, what's wrong with that joke? Oh, she liked that joke a lot. And what about this one? Oh, she's telling me she liked that one too. Oh no, okay, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no, compliments throughout the manuscript.
Right.
Love this. That was great. LOL. Big smiley face. Like, yeah. Notes. Yeah. The best.
And I just have one more question I'm going to ask, and that is, so when we are having conventions in person again, which we're all very hopeful for, and I'm looking forward to Sanhai in person. And so what has been the most exciting cosplay when someone's dressed up as a character that you've written or created?
Oh, goodness. Gosh, where do we get? I think that the 2 big ones would be going back some. So on my run of Batman, I created this character, Jason Todd, who was Robin for a while, came back as a villain named Red Hood. So I think the very first time I was at a comic convention and somebody walked by dressed as Jason Todd in the Red Hood outfit that I designed with Doug Monkey, who was the artist on the book. And I kind of looked at them and I said, like, wow. And then later I happened to be walking past them again. It's like, hey, get your camera out. Like, why? Just get your camera out. Like, we're gonna take a picture together. I'm Judd Winnick, I created Jason Todd. Like, oh my God. Like, yeah, no, cool. Let's do it. Let's do it. That was awesome. And then when pictures started floating in of kids dressing up as Hilo, just really blew my mind. I mean, I think I'll tell the story without getting choked up. During, I think when the second book came out, I met a little girl, actually. I think she was maybe in 3rd grade, and she had been bullied a lot at school. And it's a very long story short. One day she started coming to school dressed as Hilo. She put on a blonde wig, wore a t-shirt she made, and was dressed head to toe Hilo. And it wasn't Halloween, but the kids are asking, why are you dressed like this? I'm dressed like my favorite character, Hilo. And for whatever reason, it took the entire focus off picking on her. And it became all about her just being Hilo. And she managed just to blow past it. And it just killed me. I spoke with her mom. Her mom got all weepy about it, and I got all weepy about it. I say the best part is when I met this little girl who dressed up like Hilo. She was telling me the story, and she wasn't even the least bit emotional about it at all. it was like, yeah, no, they're picking on me. I would go home crying like every day, like, oh, for like a couple of weeks, like no, it was like months from the time school started almost to the December holidays. I would go home crying, and she was so totally fine now. It was the best. I wish this upon everybody, that they can make a little something that can actually improve a kiddo's life like that. It was awesome. So that was the best cosplay story I got.
That's great. I'm a little broken up just listening to that. Having that impact. And then one final question for me is, you've been doing Hilo. You're continuing to do Hilo. Is there any book that's in your future beyond the Hilo books?
Yeah, there's a couple more series coming out. I'll tiptoe around this a little bit. We've already announced it. There's a new superhero book that I'll be writing and drawing called The Mighty, which is it is yet another kiddo superhero book. And what I'm also hoping to do is do a few more titles where unfortunately I can only write and draw 1 book a year. With The Mighty, I was able to manage to squeeze in 2, just barely. But I'm hoping to team up with other cartoonists where I'll be writing the story and they'll be drawing it. That's my hope. It's been a long time since I've collaborated with some folks, and I look forward to that too. But The Mighty, which we don't have a release date for, about a little girl who's also a superhero, that'll be probably 2022. Way off when we're going outside again, and the air is sweeter, the sun is shining. Knock wood. So off in the distance. But I will say this, that I think for the rest of my life, there'll be me writing and drawing stories just like this. To go back to King Kong and to Hilo took me a while to figure out, and kind of come full circle, because Hilo is very much like the comic strips that I wanted to do. They're drawn in kind of a goofy way with lots of jokes, and they're stories for everybody. I mean, that's kind of what I've always wanted to do. So I'm going to stick with that.
That sounds great. And with that, I'll thank you, Judd Winnick, for coming on, being part of Kids Love Comics, and hopefully we'll all see you in person in Baltimore next year or sometime soon.
I can't wait. Hopefully a day will come soon, very soon. John, thank you so much. This has been like, it's barely been like a interview thingy. It's like we're hanging out. I appreciate that. It has been great.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate you taking all this time to talk with me and meet with me. I know your schedule's busy, and I know your kids need to start taking over your Wi-Fi again.
They will. They're probably texting me, right? That's what I'm getting text right now. Like, Dad's been an hour. Can we go back on?
Right.
Literally, Dad's been an hour. Can we go back on?
So, okay. Thanks a lot, Judd. Take care.
Thank you, sir.